Hi Nasim, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. So with a show like Chad, I do love, whenever we get to put like an actress who is not in school anymore into these roles because I think it's very funny and it already adds to the comedy. But I do love with this show in particular, like this season, Chad's going through like normal things like having a crush and trying to navigate like getting to go somewhere with his friends. And for you, what is the joy of getting to dig into a character like that? That is the comedy's kind of built in, but you do have to sell it in such a way so then we believe like, yeah, you are a child going through these
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah, honestly, the origin story of it started with me really wanting to find, in creating my own show, a character that I could just have so much fun playing. That could be a hard comedy, that was a show for everyone, and at the center of it, a coming of age story that I really did think, to your point, like you could push the comedy so much further if instead of watching an actual teen actors suffer through some of the awkward moments that we can all remember from high school. If you know that the teenager at the center of it's being played by an adult that can bring that perspective and nuance to the role, having survived their teenage years and getting to the other side of it. So I really felt like I could probably disappear into looking like a little boy with the help of hair and makeup. There's the wig and the eyebrows and the clothing and the posture. And it just felt like something that would be really fun to play.
Yeah, and does that, I mean, I'm sure it does help you that like I was going to ask you about like bringing your own life experiences into this because I do think you make a great point. So many of our like material geared towards like high school or younger kids are played by people who I'm like, well, you don't know what that feels like yet. Like you're not there, or you're an actor, so you probably aren't even in school. For
Right, like teenagers don't know what's so funny about being a teenager because they're
yeah,
still in that washing machine of angst and hormones and like that, just that precarious age where the stakes of everything feel like life and death, even if it's
mhm.
like a small thing.
Yeah, and I think too, like this season obviously starts with like Chad thinking he's so cool because being the class president and everything else kind of on his shoulders from like the summer with those little things. Obviously, we know, like, yeah, sure, if you got to be class president and hang out with the cool kids all summer, you would have a different hair to you. But how do you kind of navigate those moments and changes throughout Chad, especially throughout this season, since he goes through so much?
Well, we loved this idea of him finally at the end of season getting what he wants, which was popularity, but
Mhm.
possibly for the wrong reasons. And so the fact that it was all built around this misunderstanding of a hate crime just felt like such a funny comedy engine for season two, because you just know the other shoe's about to drop.
Mhm.
And it eventually does. And he kind of hits rock bottom and has to climb back up from that. So it gave me as a performer so much to play with, because he finally gets access to the popular kids and the sort of social orbit that he's been craving all season. And then it all comes crashing down, which again, for me to play out some of those scenes is so fun. And also, Jake Ryan, who plays Chad's best friend, is just such a perfect counterpart because he's so unbothered by all of this, like by popularity. He's just like trying to be a good kid. And Chad can't wrap his head around that, because Chad is coming at everything from such a place of desperation, a desperation to fit in and to belong. And yeah, he was definitely a more extreme version of what I was like in high school, but certainly fun to play.
Yeah, and I do love because, most of the time with shows like this, it is from a male perspective. And it is kind of funny that technically Chad is giving us the male perspective, but the show itself is not from a male perspective. It's from a female perspective. Was that something that was on your mind, or was it just kind of what happened when you decided that it was going to be based on Chad and not like a female going through this?
Well, No, for sure. I mean, I obviously spent time thinking about that and what is it that we're saying about what it means to be a 14-year-old boy in
Mhm.
high school today. I, aside from being a late bloomer and a tomboy, I did grow up with all guy cousins for the
Mhm.
most part. So it didn't feel so unfamiliar to me, like in terms of things to write to. I think the thing that was more um and a thing that I saw as an opportunity that we really had to get right was the fact that it was set in present day. And I think, kids today deal with things that are so different than what my generation, of high schoolers dealt with. The fact that they're under the microscope of social media and there's just so much more they have to tackle and navigate socially. So we definitely did a ton of research. We had a lot of interviews with actual high school kids, and luckily the kids on the show are also actual Gen Z kids. So we had this sort of like built-in fact-checking apparatus when we were shooting, where we could be like, "Do you guys do this? Does this feel, authentic and real?" And yeah, but the 14-year-old boy of it all, that felt like I just felt like I could disappear into looking physically like a boy, um, perhaps more than I could a girl. And again, I don't know why it was completely in my wheelhouse and comfort zone, probably because I was like such a tomboy growing up. But yeah, it was really fun.
But I do like that it's set in the modern era because I do think whenever we do things like this, it's normally like, okay, well, we go back to the 80s or the 90s or whatever it might be because that's easier and we know that. Setting it in the modern though, it makes it so it's you have to get it right because we live in the age of technology and social media. Someone's going to say, we don't do that. That's not how school is anymore. But having, the elements of social media and all that be a part of this high school experience, especially on a show like Chad that is set during this time, do you find that easier to kind of work within the parameters of both being an actor and like this kind of being your idea? Or is that more of a challenge because it's not something that like my generation or your generation kind of had ingrained in us when we were growing up?
That's a great question. I mean, I think like the DNA and heart of the show is really more about the perspective of this character.
Mhm.
And I felt like I could write to that in present day or set it back in the day. But what I actually found to be really fun and perhaps even helpful once I cracked the character was that, in today's somewhat woke culture, I thought it'd be actually really funny if, unlike the shows we're familiar with from the 80s and 90s, where the coming of age stories typically had like a school bully and the kid was getting bullied by this external force, I thought it'd be really fun to set it in present day with him going to a school that's like pretty accepting of him and he's not getting really bullied by anyone. It's that the character is getting in his own way more than anything else, because it just felt like a fresher take that maybe I hadn't seen as much. And so much of the comedy does come from Chad sabotaging himself rather than having this like external bully that's ruining his life. And, he just is constantly spiraling and getting himself into crazier, weirder situations by his own doing. So, in that regard, it actually felt to me a little more interesting to set it in present day and to have him kind of be his own worst enemy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for our last question, I do have to ask because, like, I do love how each season so far has had this kind of like, okay, well, here is what Chad is working towards, or here's what's going to happen in this season. It has like an overarching story for Chad as he's just trying to also be a normal kid. For you, when you were thinking of like a season three or thinking of whatever is coming next for Chad, what do you hope he gets to tackle given, what happened in season one and now what just happened with season two?
Well, honestly, I mean, we weren't sure what the show went through a merger
Mhm.
right before season two came out, which is why we were even lucky enough that it ended up airing, period. Like it ended up being saved by the skin of its teeth thanks to Roku, which I'm actually so excited about. It's in so many more homes, and I can't wait for an entirely new audience to find it. So I wasn't even sure at the time that I was editing season 2 if we would get a season 3, but it almost didn't matter because we decided to leave him in. I'm assuming you saw the
Yeah.
finale, and we leave him in at the airport in Paris. It felt like such a funny ending, even if the show weren't to continue, because if he thought he was a fish out of water going to that high school in America, he's now in a foreign country. And once again, like he shoots his shot, but it's not always the best situation for him. So I just love the thought of him now having to navigate his way in a country where he doesn't speak the language, and he followed a girl incredibly impulsively with no backup plan.
Yes, and I do hope we get to see that because I think it would be genuinely very funny. But thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. And I hope if they haven't yet, I hope people go and watch season 2 and just all fall in love with Chad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.
Bye.